Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a man who's been close to the heart of the Green Party's surge to a central position in German politics in the last couple of decades. He's also played an influential role for the United Nations on 3 continents, and he's currently the chairman of the German Parliament's Human Rights Committee. And here he is in person, Tom Koenigs.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. Now, Tom Koenigs has a reputation as a very thoughtful and soft-spoken, but also very tenacious politician, and as somebody who's open to unorthodox solutions. So I think we can very much look forward to talking to him about the following topics. Global operator Tom Koenigs has been on the front line in the international battle for human rights in Kosovo, Guatemala and Afghanistan. Stricter standards. The German government says the time has come to link the provision of development aid with robust commitments to ethical standards. And education as a human right. We find out how an 86-year-old former teacher has helped to create over 40 new schools in Afghanistan, and about the risks. Tom Koenigs, welcome once again. I'd like to begin with first principles, as it were, because on December the 10th, 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I've written down the first sentence of the first article of that declaration, and it reads the following: all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. I'd like to ask you what that sentence means today, given that it's a million miles away from the lives that many, many people live.
It's not at all a million miles away. That is the essence of human rights. It's a dignity, equality and conscience. That is the point. And all the other articles are linked to this one. And if people are not treated with dignity, if their dignity is violated, you have all sorts of continuing violations up to terrorism or war. That is the essence. And it's universal. It is not born in Western Europe or Christian religion. It's universal. And the universality shows up, particularly in the revolts in Northern Africa. There they fight for human rights. But equally in China, IYY and others, they fight for human rights. It is universal. And that is what is so important about it. That is what's so convincing. It is a task for humanity.
Would you say, from your experience around the world in many different situations, locations, in many different continents, would you say that the universal human rights that you're talking about, are we winning the battle for those universal human rights, or losing the battle?
I don't know whether Sisyphus has been a very happy man, as Camus said. And certainly it's a day-to-day task. It's hard. People die for human rights. Everyone fighting for human rights is fighting a battle which is worth it. So everybody, to a certain degree, every human rights activist is winning already through the activity itself. So in general, yes, we are winning. Even if in some areas we lose, we suffer. The point is the dignity.
Tom Koenigs, we've seen there that you've had a very interesting career, a very interesting life. Very important throughout has been the whole question of human rights. And when we talk about human rights, I must ask you, are there human rights abuses in Germany?
Yes, certainly there are.
Certainly.
There are certainly human
Tell
rights. One is lack of equality, of equal chances. Those who are born from the lower part of the society, immigrants, they don't have the same chances as others. They are somehow selected. After 3 years of school, you know already that they'll never come to a university. And we don't act against that. And the disparity, the inequality is growing between the rich and the poor. This is a violation of human rights. It's a discrimination.
And it's very interesting that you say this, because the reason I'm asking about Germany is because Germany does have a tendency to send its top diplomats, its top politicians out into the world to wag their fingers at other countries, and people find that very irritating sometimes.
That is irritating. And for instance, to deal with other nations where we have a critique to the human rights performance, the easiest and most successful way is to speak about our problems. I have been in China as the Human Rights Commissioner for the German Foreign Ministry. A human rights dialogue. It was super sterile for 2 days. There was no movement on no side. And in the end, I was so bored and so appalled. In the end, I said to the audience, look, I'd like to raise one problem we had in Germany with torture. There was a police chief who had not tortured, but threatened to torture. And we had a huge debate, and I explained that. The audience, the diplomats, first of all, Chinese, they knew the case. They had debated about it. It was dealt with in the university. And the most interesting for them was how the press dealt with it. And that was certainly the most fruitful part of these 2 days. And we discussed 2.5 hours. And that is a way you can give your message in a much more successful way.
Interesting, very interesting stuff. I'd like to just move on quickly, because you're a member of the Green Party, which has a strong pacifist element. Germany as a country has a strong pacifist streak. Is it important for Germany to learn to fight for human rights? I'm talking about Libya as well here.
I think it is important for Germany to see that we have our nation, the Republic of Germany has been founded after an intervention of the international community against dictatorship in Germany. We have been liberated. We should never forget that. We have committed genocide. We should never forget that we have to prevent genocide actively. I respect somebody who says, I don't touch any gun. But on the other hand, we cannot say the others will resolve it. We should have prevented Srebrenica. We should have prevented Rwanda with German soldiers. We should send some more blue helmets. We don't send. And we should have participated in the vote on Libya.
Germany should have said yes.
They should have said yes. And how they share the intervention, by ships, by humanitarian aid, by helping the refugees, or by troops, that is a different question. Okay. But they shouldn't have isolatedly, together with the Russians and the Indians, abstain. I think it is any particular way of the German government is a way in the wrong direction. We should be in the Union, in the European consensus.
Okay. Moving on, but very related, given recent events in the Arab world and elsewhere, the whole issue of what line Germany and other democracies should adopt towards authoritarian regimes has become more relevant than ever. We've got this report.
Former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, for many years a welcome-honored guest of German heads of state. Even though Mubarak's democratic credentials were shaky at best, he was long regarded as a reliable partner and force for stability in the Middle East region.
We knew human rights abuses were rampant. Our relationship was mainly an economic one, such as within the Union for the Mediterranean. We always intended to promote economic aid and human rights. But the "and" got left out.
Business first, human rights later. Problems are brushed under the carpet with a handshake and a smile, even in dealings with dictators and autocrats.
We cannot be politically active in the world without engaging with regimes that aren't in line with our own values. An international climate agreement can't be made without China. And we can't advocate peace in the Middle East without working with Syria, Egypt, and the rest. But we need to have a clear sense of direction. The extent of our cooperation must and should be determined by how these countries deal with their own domestic opposition.
Putting a good face on a bad situation, Critics say the West is guilty of lending a gloss of respectability to dictators as human rights fall by the wayside.
Well, there was one voice in that report saying that, that yes, there is realpolitik, but what you need is a moral compass. How can the moral compass look?
As a human rights activist, one should always be by the side of the victims. That is a moral compass. And if you have dictatorships, you have to be with the civil society who suffers from this dictatorship. You have always groups who suffer. You have always organizations who want to change. And if in a situation like, for instance, Tunisia, you have a long-standing dictator, the German government would do well to cooperate through the embassies, through development cooperation with the victims, with the civil society, with the open society, through exchange, through universities, through talkings, through financial aid, through teaching. That's the point where we should be. We should be with the people of Egypt, with the people of Tunisia, with the people of Afghanistan, even if in a given moment we cannot agree with the government. In extreme cases, you have to use the international sanction regimes on the UN basis, on the EU basis, also on bilateral. But generally, we should look for those who need our help, particularly in a situation like Syria. There, the people need our help, our support. We should take up refugees, asylum seekers to a much larger degree than we do at the moment. But there's always a point for a human rights activist to act. I would appreciate if the government would not only focus on the bilateral governmental cooperation, but also focus on international organizations who deal with the children, for instance, like UNICEF, or with the health situation in the poorest countries like World Health Organization. That's how you can operate in these areas, which we have not in Egypt and Tunis, unfortunately.
Because in many ways, what you're saying, it's a plea for the exercise of soft power, for engaging in dialogue. Let's just 1 second, first of all, though, because what we're also talking about here, what Tom has been mentioning as well as a real important aspect of the human rights debate, is the whole debate about poverty. And the German government, it says it's going to get serious on linking funding for development assistance, for development aid, with stricter observance of international human rights standards. Let's take a quick look at the issues.
New schools in Afghanistan. That's a German development policy goal. But much of the funding, it's widely thought, ends up in the coffers of the Afghan administration. That's why Germany is withholding over 125 million euros in aid. Under the new human rights concept, this practice will become policy.
We'll place greater demands on human rights compliance and put more conditions in place when they're not observed. That's been done in the past, but now it's part of an overall concept.
Development aid as leverage. No human rights means no money. A seemingly simple equation that gets cautious approval from human rights groups.
It's an important step toward bringing human rights to the forefront of development policy. We hope the concept will be implemented in practice and result in concrete change in the government's development policy.
For example, in Uganda, parliamentarians there planned to vote on a bill to make homosexuality punishable by death. In response, foreign aid donors withheld millions in funds. The Ugandan parliament has postponed the vote.
It's an interesting debate, that's going on, because the feeling I have is that if the German government is getting stricter about ethical standards now, then what were they doing before? That's one question that comes to mind for me. Have you got an answer to that?
I don't have an answer to that. I think there is a way out of this dilemma. The way is to focus on education and contact between the educational institutions, the Germans and the foreign countries. Because I have experienced in my time abroad that nothing is so asked for from the Germans and nothing is so fruitful for human rights and peace than education.
Let me just interrupt you for a second, because the next question I was going to ask you, because you keep emphasising education and access to education, and the next question I was going to say is, you know, where and how is Germany having a positive impact on development and human rights? And one point I wrote down was the establishment in the future, it's coming up now, of the German-Turkish University. That has to be a brilliant example of what we should be doing.
We should do much more of this type, because that's what people want. My experience in Afghanistan, there have been one or two German schools over the time. They have really influenced the country, and we should do more of that. There is a brilliant cooperation between one or two universities in Afghanistan with one or two universities in Germany. Why not 20? That's what's needed, and they don't need so much road, or they do need it, but they don't ask the Germans. They would much better ask the Indians, because they do it in a different way. And what you get into the heads of the people, what you get into the minds, that is what really helps in the long run. That makes you friends. That delivers, and all the hardware is not so useful. We need software, not only soft power, but also software.
Soft power, software. We're talking once again about the right to education. So let's stay in Afghanistan, where Tom Koenigs has all sorts of expertise, and look at a non-governmental initiative that has helped to give people just that, education.
2,600 boys, 2,400 girls, grades 1 to 12, 120 teachers.
5,000 students from Mazar-i Sharif attend school in tents. Ursula Nuller and Marga Flade are planning a new school building. It will be the 41st built by the organization in Afghanistan.
The project keeps growing, it never ends. We started small, with a girls' school 27 years ago. At the time, I had no idea this would become such a huge operation.
There is no expensive office space. The work is done from home, in the town of Oststeinbeek near Hamburg. Most of the volunteers are local. When Ursula Nuller paid a visit to her daughter studying in Pakistan, she saw the plight of Afghans in refugee camps.
It was a transit camp, without tents, just scraps of cloth to live under. You can't just say to yourself, it's not my concern.
Since then, she's been organizing the construction of new schools. First under the Russian occupation, then under the Mujahideen, then under the Taliban, and now under the Karzai government.
The minute you arrive in Afghanistan, you have the feeling you belong, that you're a part of the community, and you're given so much trust and affection. But you also see what's needed, and there's no escaping that.
Education is the key to transformation, says Ursula Nuller. It's not just children who go to the schools to learn. In the evenings, young women take sewing classes. The furnishings for each new classroom cost 500 euros. The association needs at least 800,000 euros each year for basic expenses, so fundraising is essential. But Ursula Nuller is tireless in her work.
If she's been touched by someone, she'll really fight for them, and she won't give up. If she believes in something, she'll fight for it, and that can get pretty intense.
That's because building schools in Afghanistan can be dangerous. The Taliban doesn't want to see girls educated. Ursula Nuller's regional director, Rahman Kul, was murdered in 2007. She and her daughter Tina narrowly escaped an attack on a friend's house.
A Kalashnikov bullet went through a window and right between Freva and Tina into a doorframe. Something like that affects you. The next time I took Tina along, I lay in bed at night wondering whether it was right to do so. I'm not afraid for myself, but I do worry about other people.
In Afghanistan, Ursula Nuller found her calling, and she plans to build more schools there for as long as she can.
Tom Koenigs, you know the country. That is a fantastic woman. It's a fantastic project, very courageous, but huge risks. Is she, by taking those risks, helping to mould Afghanistan's future, to make the future, or is it in vain, the work she's doing?
She definitely moulds the future. And what she does, and there are so many people who are so dedicated, so engaged, so active, and there's practically nobody who comes to Afghanistan and isn't in love with the country and with the people after 2 months. And part of the human rights activism is to go there, to deal with the people, to handle the problems, to be active.
But if you're saying all this and people listen to you in Germany, why are, I don't know what the figure is currently, but certainly the vast majority of people here in Germany want to bring the Bundeswehr, the German soldiers, home? These are the people who are protecting projects like that.
That's on one side, it's right. On the other side, the result of the military intervention is limited and will not continue. 15 years of foreign military presence is the utmost they will suffer. And on our side, the internal politics in the United States and Germans are not for a longer stay. But we have to stay with our civilian action. We have to stay with our development cooperation. And we have to define it now, what we are going to do there. My suggestion is the more education, the better. The more focus on something we can deliver, the better. There's much more infrastructure here and there necessary and possible to go ahead with this educational program. My illusion is that better education brings more peace. But this might be an illusion of some...
Many people would say to you now, we don't have much time, but I'd like to tell you to tell me what you would say about this. Many people would say that as soon as the German forces go, as soon as the other coalition forces go, things will go back to where they were 10 years ago.
Something will happen then, but at least we have some people who have learned something, who have a future, who have a professional future. Some who have learned that human rights human rights is part of life. It's a right, a freedom, and they deserve it.
OK, on that very optimistic note, we're going to move on to our traditional Talking Germany quiz at the end of the show. First question for you, Tom Koenigs. In international diplomacy, carrot and stick or talk, talk, talk?
Talk, talk, talk.
Aha. As a former student protester, are you still an opposition man or an establishment man?
I'm an opposition man. Actually, you are always in opposition as a human rights activist.
Ah, very good, yeah. As a former lefty, here's a good question for you.
Still lefty.
As a still lefty, is capitalism part of the problem or part of the solution?
Both.
Both, I thought you might say that. Is Germany doing enough for human rights, yes or no?
No, certainly not.
Must Germany also go to war for human rights, yes or no?
Sometimes we should remember that we have been liberated by war.
I think that was a yes. A sad reality, perhaps. That's it. He's been a great guest, a very thoughtful man, Tom Koenigs. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.